Brilliant. October 4th. It is already October. The fall weather is coming. The Austin weather is very reasonable. It's been in the 80s. It's 91 right now. See a lot of people wearing jackets, light sweaters, things like that. And I'm sure that up north, the trees are beautiful in changing colors.
Well, they really are. I assure you that it's just beginning now. It's very late this year. I was on Cape Cod for a conference, and it was lovely, but the trees had not changed. An occasional pretty tree, but not the full-fledged color that we expect.
So before we get rolling, let's have our own John Sibley Butler play some music.
Come gather well wherever you roam, and admit that the waters around you have grown, and accept that it's soon you'll be drenched to the ground. For the time is changing. Please get out of the new one if you can't stand your time. For the time is like a change. Come mothers and fathers throughout the land, and don't criticize what you can't understand. Your sons and your daughters are beyond your command. Your world is rapidly aging. Please get out of the new one if you can't ignore it. The time will change.
All right.
And it is drawn, the curse it is cast. The slow one now will later be fast, as the present now will later be past. The old may be moving, and the next one now will later be last. For the time.
Johnny, if we had known, we wouldn't have had to invent Bob Dylan, would we?
That's an old Bob Dylan song from the 60s.
I know, yeah.
Let us know what's going on now, and it's going on now, even with the, my gosh, look what happened in the House, what the House voted to do. What can we say? It's the first time in my lifetime. Now, I will say, I think that when somebody loses like that, they usually step down voluntarily, right? But what do we say when with Kevin from California is voted out? I think it was 200 or 216 to whatever, 216 to 210. I think that's a major thing. And I don't know what that's an indication of, because I said, I think in the history of America, when that happens, it happens when they sort of kind of lose the touch, but that certainly is going on. And I think for the first time in a long time, politics became at the forefront of everything as we move into an election. And we just finished a great conference with 360, Digital 360, held at Texas State University, hosted by our own magnificent Andre Carvallo. And we had people from all over the world, including Lewellyn King. I rushed back to Austin because we had a client who got in early, and that client is very important. So I got him tickets to the game, took care of him, and then everybody from the conference came by my club and hung out after after the conference. I think if we look at the economy, it's pretty wild what's going on in China. It's pretty wild what's going on in Europe. And I think when all of that happens, there's always been suffering in the world. There have always been wars in the world. But mine, we get a tweet on every time something happens. We get a tweet on when somebody gets divorced. We get a tweet on when there's an earthquake. We get a tweet on when a stock falls. So the knowledge economy, the knowledge and know-how can be worrisome at times. But certainly we know that information is very, very important. So we string along here in the great state of Texas with the weather changing. I went outside this morning and had to put my overcoat on. Mine, it was 82 degrees. It was so cold. So the weather itself is changing. And if you look at everything else, we still have to manage the country. We still have to manage. You know, people ask me, I was on a show the other day. I said, well, you know, to me, we have one party in America, and that's the business party. That's the capitalist party. And it goes straight up and down. And then we have the Democratic Party and the Republican Party that comes in and ask for money as they run. So it's a lot of stuff that's going on. Politics will be very, very interesting for the first time in a long time, I think, in America. We might have a Republican candidate who's on his way to jail. We have, as Lewellyn has pointed out, everybody tends to be elderly. We had a senator who died at 90 years old. So it's just very, very interesting. It looks like the baby boomers don't want to give up the ship and let everybody take it along. So things are fine, Andreas. How you doing?
Good, good, good. I'm glad you brought some interesting things up. Let's reflect on all those. Let me say hello to Lewellyn King. Lewellyn, how are you, sir? Where are you?
Very good. I'm in Rhode Island. I was on Cape Cod for the weekend for Lodge Burns and McDonald conference, and made some television films while we were there. And now I'm back in Rhode Island, and I have a lot of catching up work to do before I go on my next tranche of travel, which is to a conference in the Midwest. And then Linda and I go to Albania for the Association of European Journalists, which is that's a first for us going to Albania. And it's a busy year. I'm hoping at the end of the year to go to Cuba for Christmas. I'm not sure I'll pull it off, but the Cuba is worth seeing before it changes all recognition. The great thing about Cuba, I've been there twice, awful government, but wonderful people, great music. There's more music on the streets of Cuba than I think there is in New Orleans. Wherever you go, there are kids singing, dancing, playing some instrument. That, as Johnny would say, is a very, very interesting place. So it's going to be a full rest of the year. The conference, your conference, the Digital 360, I thought had some really high points. For me, probably the best speaker was the speaker talking about water, which was awesome and chilling. He pointed out how vulnerable Texas is to water deprivation, how hard the two major aquifers have been pumped dry. And of course, when you're sitting in extraordinary heat, and heat which may now be a permanent feature, we don't know that, but it's reasonable to anticipate something like that. You're obviously going to use more water if you're watering crops with it, because it's going to evaporate quicker and you're going to need more water. Then there's very sad news, which was not at the conference, but related to the water issue, and that is the seepage of salt water into farmland in Louisiana and in Florida, and to some extent in a few other coastal places. What happens is, if the land gets too dry, salt water seeps in and it destroys any ability of that land to raise crops. I mean, it kills it. Salt is a very terrible thing to have in quantity on land, and salt water is not good for anything really except the ocean. And that, I took that away very dramatically. I also think that the full appreciation of how transformative this time is, how seminal this year is, bringing about whole new directions in the world, was hinted at rather than explored, because it takes a while for things to really sink in. Now, one of the big issues, which was raised correctly, was water. I was particularly impressed with the panel, which I had the honor of chairing, of smart city managers, how sophisticated they were, how advanced, how they're using things like AI. And most of us think it's still coming, and they were explaining how they use it already. I thought that was a high point. And several other really interesting things. I do, though, as a generalization, think that there was probably an underestimation of how transformative the times are. But they were hinting at it, a lot of the speakers, rather than really tackling it straight out, in my view. However, I think it was a very valuable exchange of information, and this is a very special conference. It brings together industry, academia, and people like myself who don't really fit into either of those. So overall, I think bravo and well done, Andres.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. We cover many topics, and I thought that some of the most fascinating conversations were, of course, around artificial intelligence and digital twins and the grid of the future and networks, smart cities. I wonder, John, of all the conversations, and obviously you had a wonderful keynote on business models and how cities should be thinking about monetizing data. Of all those topics, what do you think? What are your thoughts on, given what's going on right now, the next 12 months? What's the most important thing that people are talking about, in your opinion? You're muted.
I think people are talking about being overwhelmed with duty, and how do you get the data to actually mean something? People are talking about the whole idea of making sure that all of your business security does not hit the street. Because what we're dealing with now is massive data sets. But for cities, and when you look at what they need to do, they need to begin to understand how that data can turn from junk, right, to and monitorize the data. Just because you have data, it does not mean you're going to be good at creating business models. And the other thing is a lack of people, right, who quote understand what's going on. Well, I've always said that it's data in, data out. You train people what your city is about. So we've got this thing about the city, of course, as a service. Because at the end of the day, the purpose of the city is to serve the citizens, to make sure that their citizens are safe, to make sure that their citizens have great restaurants, to make sure that their citizens have great jobs. Or what has changed, or the great jobs perhaps people are moving away from the jobs outside of the city. So if we look at city managers, I've always said in all of my discussions that we got to make people aware of the new business model. They just have to be aware of the new business models. People don't understand that there are probably 3,000 people making $1 million now just on Amazon, and just on Amazon themselves. So the big thing is this: you have all the data coming in. It would be data upon data upon data. How do you scrutinize the data? How do you create business models through analysts and make something that's significant to serve the city itself? So I think about a city as a service. Everything that you do as a mayor, everything that you do as a city council person should be to serve the citizens. Now, of course, citizens will get sort of beside themselves, but when they want better schools, when they want better roads, when they want better communications, then it goes back to the city. So up to and I wouldn't necessarily say smart people, I would say aware people. I would say that we could take the people that we now have, right? And of course, you might need a good business analyst. You might need someone who understands data, but the data has to be broken out into transportation. It has to go broken out into smart buildings. It has to be broken out right into smart lights. It's got to be departmentalized when the businesses are creating. So we had a lot of discussions in the hallway about, okay, how do you make money for the cities? And we went over the business models. Of course, I talked about what we've done at CMG to do with lighting. But lighting as a service is just one. We have small businesses as a service, right? We have transportation as a service. That means there'll be better buses, right? That means that businesses that fires would be predicted, right? It means all of these things. So the big thing I would say, Andreas, is the question is, how do you take all of the data.
Hmm.
Create.
I think that's very interesting, but I think there
Yeah.
are big things happening going beyond business models and the expectation that things will go on as they have been, but somewhat different. I would quote Leon Trotsky, who said, "You may not be interested in war, but war is interested in you." I would say you may not be interested in AI, but AI is interested in you. I would say Trotsky said, "You may not be interested in war, but it's interested in you." I would say you may not be interested in climate change, but climate change is interested in you. And these two forces cannot go on without huge manifestations in the way we live, work, play, etc. And I think they're very hard to grasp because they're both somewhat futuristic, yet they are here and now. They have arrived, they're not in the gestation period, they're in the deployment period, and we don't know what to do about them. The extreme heat of this summer is an inclination. It's causing people in Africa and Central America to migrate at a huge rate because farming is either it's too hot to do it, or you have no water, or the crops don't grow and the animals cannot be raised as they did heretofore. If you're going to lose, for whatever reason, farmland to saltwater seepage, you're into big trouble. All up the east coast of the United States and many other places where there has been either overbuilding or, much more disastrous, overpumping of aquifer water. And there is nothing, no quick solution. People talk about desalination, and it certainly would help, but it's not a perfect solution because it has its own associated problems. It uses a tremendous amount of power, and it produces a lot of salt, millions of tons of salt, which are very hard to dispose of. You don't just put them back in the ocean and it all circulates away. It tends to descend into the ocean, spread along the ocean floor, and kill everything. A lot of sea life over salting. You know, the ocean is salt, but it's not going to deal with the introduction of disproportionate amount of salt. So we're looking at a lot of things. However, there are some very exciting things happening. I have a friend who's a fabulous man and thinker, writer, who is handling AI for NASA. I met him in Houston, but now he's operating in Washington. And he points out that AI will do so much for medical research that we can genuinely look at greater life expectancy. He also, like myself, thinks it's going to have a rather devastating effect on huge areas of employment. In 10 years, I would suggest, you will go to the airport to check into a flight. You will talk to something, a screen. You'll probably see your own reservation and the seating on the aircraft. You will say to it, "I don't like that. Can you change my seat? I'm flying." It will say whether you can or you can't, or if you've got the wrong flight. You will be just like talking to a human being, except there will be no human being. In air traffic control, you will have a great substitution of the human factor by artificial intelligence. It will take longer because of public resistance to having airplanes flown by artificial intelligence, but it's very possible. And if you get to that state, these are not just entry-level jobs. Some of them are quite advanced. You can't be a total dummy and run the front desk in a very busy airport. You certainly can't be a total dummy and do air traffic control, as they say, pushing tin. And there it goes from there. These are going to the other side of AI, besides its fabulous role in all kinds of research, is that it's going to, there's a great danger of how do we know what is true? Truth is in its sights, and it's not going to be good. Intellectual property is not going to be easy to protect, and we won't know what we watch or what we read, whether it is true or whether it is being generated to deceive us. If it has been generated to deceive us, we need right now to start working on ways of watermarking it, of verifying the certainty. A big-time Washington lawyer, who is a good friend of mine, he said, "What do we do about this?" I was on a webinar that he runs on artificial intelligence. And I said, you know, if you really want to be sure, you better type it on a typewriter, on a piece of paper, and send it by messenger to the person who wants to see it. That way you will know it's actually true and it hasn't been manipulated, or for that matter, spied on. So we really are, this I said at your conference, John, Andres, this is a seminal moment. This is a year like the discovery of printing, the first deployment of a condenser on a steam engine. Things will not be the same again. I think that the best thing to look at to see what might happen is to look what happened to weaving. Weaving was a hand job by skilled people. Along came the automated weaving machine, powered by steam or by water power. I'm sitting in a mill where they use water power in New England, and people lost a lot of jobs, the old weavers, hence Ned Ludd and the Luddites trying to break the looms. But eventually there were more clothes for everyone, and everybody benefited from mechanical weaving way more than they would have done if they had stayed with craft weaving. So we need to see both what are the opportunities here. There's no point in wringing your hands, because there is a great inevitability to the arrival of artificial intelligence, climate change. We need to see the opportunities in it.
Yes, I think
Absolutely.
exactly, and I think the smart city will allow us to predict all of those things. So again, the purpose, as we were saying, I think you made my points exactly right. The purpose of the city is to safeguard the citizens, right? So therefore, if we have sensors to understand when the salt water is coming to the city, then we understand that the sensors themselves will tell us that salt water is coming, which will protect the citizens. As new technology evolves, we have all of these things.
Yeah, I wanted to show you guys a couple of things as I want to get your comments on this. I'm going to share my screen and see if I can do this. So you probably know that Zuckerberg announced his play on AI, and I'm placing here the announcement. This came out actually last week, and he did a deal with Ray-Ban, and Ray-Ban is producing a sunglasses that you can buy. You can see the camera on the thing. You can see there's a camera there, and there's a built-in computer, and
we have Andres, we have your schedule up. We don't have.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, there we go. Now there it is.
Okay. So this is the announcement by Zuckerberg, and here's the camera built in, two sets of camera, and there's a computer and has a storage and all that. And it's basically Meta AI. He announced Meta AI, and he announced different AIs for different things. So basically, ChatGPT replacement, you can talk to it. So you're not typing, right? You're talking. So it's kind of like Star Trek. And there's a Meta AI studio to do applications and design things. And then there's AI photo editing on Instagram. And then they even came up with AI stickers, right? So it's really I don't know what the glasses cost. I don't believe that he share what the glasses cost, but it's a development platform. And just like they have the Oculus things for augmented reality, virtual reality, now they have these glasses for AI, because it's basically you can carry your computer like Star Trek, and computer, look at this, and tell me about that, tell me about this, tell me about that. So any thoughts on this? Have you guys thought about this and what this could do?
Oh, absolutely. What it is moving what we already do to in this case to eyeglasses. I want you to think about some of the great inventions where the cave where people who worked in mines all of a sudden had a light on their helmet. That was all great. What he's doing, I think, is making light very, very smart. So if I have those things in my glasses, then I can look at something and say, what is that? And it would tell me. If I have those things in my glasses, I can say, look at that. Who is that? And they would say, that's Lewellyn King. And they would tell me all about Lewellyn King. Because what happened is the glasses themselves will match whatever they're looking at. You know, it's much like now, you can take a picture of a product and put it on and show it to the computer, and the product will go right to the page. So now we have the analog of that for everybody. So as you move through time and space, you don't have to look at things that much. I happen to think that AI will make the internet as we know it obsolete in terms of going to the internet and looking things up. And this is the first indication that the internet will be obsolete. That is, now everybody will have their own internet on their person in this form. You know, it's gone from your cell phone, if you will, to the eyeglasses. And, you know, you just look at something and say, ask your glasses, you know, take me to Dallas.com. And there it is. And it'll probably come up in front of you, just like when you're driving your car, the speed limit of the speed limit comes in front of you, and it's projected outside of the car. So I've always said that as we move along, the movement of knowledge and know-how, technology will move it around. You know, we tried to do this with wrist watches at first, and now I think it's going to eyeglasses.
Yeah, and they, you know, the glasses are actually, according to this article, $299 expected to cost.
Right.
And that was last week. And the week prior, Amazon announced their, you know, their inclusion of AI into Alexa and their TVs and everything they sell, the Fire Stick and all these things. So here's advanced Alexa with LLM, which I have no idea what it stands for.
Large language model.
There you go. And then explore Alexa, and they announce eye gaze on Alexa and Fire TV search on Alexa, you know, Fire TV search using AI and AI art on your TV and call translation. So now you can talk to anybody in any language, and then Echo 8 presence detection. And I mean, this is Lewellyn, you know, this is I know that you worry about these things replacing people, but I see firsthand an improvement on helping anybody.
You know, I think there are two things going on. One is you have this huge advance in devices that have at their center electromagnetism. In other words, computers. But you have a different world out there, which you can examine with computers. They can give you, whether you call it AI or not, they can suggest a course of action, but they cannot themselves take that course of action. So that if you are losing cropland to salt water, computers may tell you about it, may even tell you at what point people will have to close down. You know, I like the way that Johnny thinks of the city as a sort of citadel, and also a source of thinking, and I like that, and I saw that at your conference. I heard it very powerfully, and I was very impressed with it. I was very impressed with what I heard about local government, how it thinks and what it does. But local government cannot control the weather. If the weather has gone haywire, local government can't do anything about it except accommodate as best possible. If people flee a city because the natural disaster is such they can't live there anymore, that won't help. In Turkey, there's one of the great Greco-Roman cities is Ephesus. Ephesus was abandoned. That's why it's in such great shape, because it was abandoned, not because of war, but because of malaria. And people who lived there didn't know what malaria was, and in the end they left. just walked away from this gorgeous city.
Mhm.
It's one of the great sights of the ancient world, very easy to see. But that's the kind of thing you're up against, huge changes. We can talk about incremental changes in fixing this or that, but if we're into a huge threat, it's quite different. The threat to reliable information should not be underestimated. If, for example, a malevolent computer operator wanted to give you a lot of misinformation about saltwater threat, you would in fact have opened up a new frontier of war without knowing it. It's just going to be a very different new time. It's going to take a lot of alacrity, and in all times of massive change, and I see massive change, in all times of massive change, there are winners and losers. And of course, because it's always been the human condition, people on the bottom tend to get hurt the most. The people who don't have great intellectual skills, the people who don't have much money, and the people who cannot comprehend what is going on. In 10, 15 years, everything we do now depends on electricity. We are turning into the principal energy source will be electric. But if we lose electricity, we are reduced to animals. What can we do? We can't drive our cars, we can't charge them, we can't use anything with it. Even if you have gasoline, you can't pump it. You lost it for any length of time. People with guns would go out looking for food and water because.
Yeah, absolutely. I wonder if Lewellyn is.
So can I just finish the thought, and I
Yes,
won't say anything.
Sure.
My thought is you've got to look at this world and these huge vulnerabilities. The more we depend on electricity, the greater the vulnerability. The more we live in cities, the greater the vulnerability. You can't, grow a few tomatoes in a city and get by for a week on tomatoes, or get by for a week on something else, or go and shoot a rabbit. I think there will be more people seeking, but not enough to make a big difference, seeking the sort of agrarian life if they can find it, as we see things tightening. But the worst damage initially, which will affect cities and everything else, is the loss of simple jobs. Cities depend on simple jobs, but if you can have a machine all by itself fill a pothole, that would be a much better pothole service, much cheaper, except for the poor human beings that were employed filling potholes.
Got it. Well,
Yeah.
I happen to think that AI in its early incarnation is going to be incredibly helpful for everybody. And I am fascinated by Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Zuckerberg, Bill Gates, everybody trying to outdo each other with the next evolution of this. And it's only going to get hotter and hotter as more companies, Apple and many others that are still to announce anything, are planning how they're going to leverage the technology to transform anything. And the beneficiary is going to be Joe Blow on the street, getting access to amazing technology for a very inexpensive price. I want to show you something else and get your feedback on it. So you're probably aware of the concert at the MGM Grand by YouTube. And I want you guys to look at this sphere.
Is the future of entertainment in a way only science fiction could predict. Some calling it eye-catching. To others, it's out of this world. And when words fail, there's always an emoji. But this 366-foot shimmering exosphere is just the beginning, because what's inside there is even more mind-blowing.
What is your name?
My name's Gotti. And I'm Jim.
Bonnie
We've
and
met
Jim.
before.
Welcome to Sphere. What
Just
brings
beyond
you
5
today?
Aura robots is a taste of the most baffling sound system in the world. You're isolating each instrument.
I'm isolating each instrument into a beat.
All of this starting with a simple sketch from Jim Dolan, owner of some of the most storied venues on Earth, who decided to reimagine entertainment with a $2.3 billion gamble in the desert. What was your reaction when you saw it turn on?
Well, I was enchanted too. I mean, it was awesome. We designed it, we visualized it, and it's so big.
And finally, inside the sphere within a sphere, 168,000 square feet of high-definition LEDs, 167,000 speakers, 17,000 seats, and 10,000 of them powered by haptics.
It's impossible to describe, right? It's like trying to explain what a peanut butter and jelly sandwich tastes like to somebody who's never tasted one.
This weekend, U2 claiming the first residency, followed closely by another fully immersive experience called Postcards from Earth, all about this even bigger sphere that we all call home. Gotti Schwartz, NBC News, Las Vegas.
Anyway, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think all of this is absolutely interesting, but it's not as interesting as the airplane to me. I mean,
Well, that's absolutely right,
I call
John.
it a time machine when I can get on in Tokyo and land in Dallas. But I think what it is now we need to get comparative with this, right? We get to get comparative. For example, when we first had the first television, the whole idea, people were saying, well, you don't have to go to school anymore. Television is coming into your home. It still amazes me today that I can sit down and watch football come to my house in such brilliant colors. So I think that these technologies are new ways for entertainment, and what they're doing is they're taking the technology and applying it to the whole idea of entertainment. And if you look at it, and if you look at robots in the center, all of the parts on the automobile, in a sense, is a robot. All the parts on an airplane, which I think is the most beautiful invention in the world, by the way, they're all robots. So I love it because it gives people another way of experiencing what they already knew. And, when I was in Japan, I taught in Japan 14 summers. I watched a robot play all of the classical guitar and all of Bach. It was on a robot, a classic guitar. So a lot of these technologies have been around, but right now they're being applied to the general population so that the general population can actually be there. The old saying is, you do not have to be there now. And I think that's very, very interesting. But hats off to them. I've taken a look at that. It's a new way of presenting, and perhaps a safer way of presenting entertainment to people.
Lewellyn?
Well, that's right, but don't confuse entertainment with real things that we need. And I like your love of airplanes, Johnny, but I would point out that the easier it is for you to go to another place, another country, the more that country will look like this one, or the more homogenization of the world will take place. I'm amazed to see the number of, I think there are 5 McDonald's on the Champs-Élysées in Paris. I mean, why would you go to Paris to see a McDonald's? So, this is one of those self-destructive things. The easier it is to do it, the more it destroys while you're doing it. Which is, if we suddenly have your beloved football, not mine, yours, if you suddenly have it played by robots, you change something. We already have this thing on television with the bots trying to knock these little cars. You're just changing something. I don't say it will stop or it's not worth doing. I think that what you learn happenstantially, the mistakes, that is the creative part of doing these things. How you learn to do something that has another totally different application that is more beneficial. And as we talk about cities, and I'm interested in cities, I've lived in Baltimore, London, Harare, Washington, New York, and now in Providence. So I'm interested in cities, what makes them work. One of the things we didn't hear at your conference, John, and it was probably remiss in me not to bring it up, is how important branding is to cities. How important, the Eiffel Tower does wonders for Paris. The arches in St. Louis don't hurt it. branding is important. I've often said that here in Providence, which is a nice little city, it lacks anything special. Nobody, there's a building, an Art Deco building called the Superman building, but it doesn't do it. Anyway, your city has to provide services, protection, safety, and employment. If there is no employment in a city or close to it, it will go away. Now we're looking at employment, and it's not over. We haven't played out this thing taking place far away. What will that do to the cities? I don't know. I don't think it will be as dramatic as some people do, but I think what it will do, and this is not so good, is it will take the high-tech people, the high earners, high spenders out of the city. And the city will be left, this thing about New York, but it's true really of every city that's really expensive. They become cities for the rich and cities for the poor. If you're in the middle, you don't want to be in New York. Housing is too expensive, everything is too. If you're on the bottom, you're just stuck. You have no way of getting out, and really not the knowledge to find a better place to live. But you do have a certain amount of employment, which the wealth in New York generates, not perhaps the kind of employment that I would care for, like doormen, elevator operators, high-end waiters. But you do have wealth generates employment in big cities. But employment is the key to the success of a city. Without it, you make a lot, I think personally that Austin might have grown too fast. Certainly when I took that trip in, which took nearly 2 hours from the airport, I thought it had grown too fast. And there were, but cities have to be in some way viable beyond always seeking new income. They have to be somewhat contained, like individuals. I think there are a lot of challenges ahead for cities, which will be helped by technology. I think if you can control the flow of water, the flow of sewage, things like this, analyze those things, cut down on the wasted plumbing, find the leaks in pipe, those things, if you can get the ambulance to speed through, that is very valuable. If the police can get there quickly, that is very valuable. But you also come bang up against social problems. Guns are a big problem. People don't want to walk down the streets in Washington at night because they may get a gun. A congressman just got that's a social problem with a very debilitating impact on a city. So there are a lot of parts, as a city is a complex place, there are a lot of parts that make it either desirable and survivable or not. And the worse those social, Rio de Janeiro is an example. I used to love that place, but not now. You can't walk in the street even at midday. So there are social factors as well as technological and economics. It's a wonderful mix of things that make up a city and its survivability and its attractiveness as a place to live.
I think, and I really like Lewellyn, the idea of branding. And when you sit down and go through all the algorithms, cities are branded by their food. So Boston is still branded by lobster. Maine is still branded by lobster. New Orleans has the best food in the world. And you go to New Orleans to eat the best food.
Have you been to Lyon, sir?
Well, I have not been to Lyon, not yet.
Well, I have been to both.
They serve lobster, what we
I
call
would
large
give the edge
crawfish.
to the French city.
Do they serve
Let's
large
not worry
crawfish?
about that, because I don't want to arouse your nationalism, your New Orleans nationalism. But you better get down there and do something about the water that's coming.
So anyway, my point is, people come to Austin, they don't ask about the high tech. They ask about what's the best Mexican restaurant here.
Tacos, baby, tacos.
People go to New York, they don't ask about, they say, what's the best opera here? So let's look at how cities are branding. And you're right. And what cities have to do is maintain their brand through all of the technology. So despite the fact that Austin has become a technopolis, our brand is still food and the cowboy, right? It's still the cowboy music and the food. Despite the fact that New York has grown and grown and grown, it's still opera. Despite the fact that LA is a great city, it is still the movies, right? And despite that, Luckenbach, Texas only have 10 people is one of our branded cities. So when you stop and think about it, you go to Mexico City, it has some of the best museums in the world, a fabulous city in Mexico City.
Great city.
Absolutely fabulous city. And so what
In,
happens
in that one area, the Zona Rosa. You
Yes,
get out of
yes,
that
yes,
and you're
yes.
one of the world's
It is
most fabulous
absolutely
spots.
fabulous. So when you think about it, it's like New Orleans. If New Orleans want to maintain their brand, they got to do something with the crime. So let's look at how cities have changed. All of the great cities of the Midwest went to the Rust Belt. I can remember giving a talk at the University of Michigan, and I said, why would you call your place the Rust Belt? You got to rebrand it as Better Michigan, as Wonderful Michigan. So they're trying to come out now of a brand that they've had that was called the Rust Belt. They went from being the Silicon Valley of America to the Rust Belt. So you're exactly right. Like individuals, we must pay attention to our reputation. And like individual cities or cities themselves, they have to manage their reputation. And we want San Francisco to continue to be the city of light, the city of love, the city of this and the city of that. We don't want it to be the city of homelessness, right? We do not want New York City to be the city of wealth. We want New York City to be the city of opera, the city of things to do. And we want London to be the city which is the financial capital of the world, no matter what happens. So you're exactly right. So let's ask this question, Andres. How do you maintain the brand of a city, given that, as Lewellyn would say, all cities look alike? So I go to Canada, I'm all excited, and I get off the plane. The first thing I see is a McDonald's. Well, okay, I didn't come up here to eat McDonald's, right?
Mhm.
So how do we maintain the brand of an Austin? One of the toughest things that Dallas had to go through was they lost the president in broad daylight.
Yeah.
President Kennedy was shot down in broad daylight. And I had friends in Boston when I was in high school, and they destroyed their automobiles if they had Texas license plates. When I fly into Dallas now, what do I think about? When I drive into Dallas, what do I think about?
Dallas Cowboys.
About the assassination of President Kennedy, right? I don't think about all of the great companies. So Dallas have had to try to overcome their brand, and they did it with the Dallas Cowboys, right? They try to rebrand it with the Dallas Cowboys. So awful things can happen in cities, and city managers must use AI and all of the new technologies to maintain the image of Texas as the wild, wild west, although it looks like Manhattan, to maintain the Miami, right, as a great place to live, although it looks like LA. So you're exactly right, Lewellyn. Branding is very, very important, and how people perceived the brand is very, very important.
It's very interesting. You talked, excuse me, I'll just say this quickly to respond to what Johnny said. And that is, you're so right about branding, of course. San Antonio has done it with a wretched little river that people love.
Yes, exactly. The Riverwalk.
So I was gonna share real quick again, because we had a wonderful keynote from Mayor Adler, and then we had a wonderful panel that Lewellyn managed. And we had, Austin, Brownsville, San Marcos, and Round Rock. And here's the list of the top global cities as of latest by earth.org. Singapore, considered by many the example of the most smarter city that can be built. Helsinki in Finland, Zurich in Switzerland, Oslo in Norway, Amsterdam in the Netherlands, New York in the United States, Seoul in Korea, and no London, and no Paris, and no Sao Paulo, and no Mexico City, and no Los Angeles, and no Tokyo. So what is it about these 7 cities?
Well, it depends on what the criteria are. There's an outfit in Singapore called a consulting company, Eden, I think it's called, And they have a list, and they tell you what the criteria are, which include things like public transport, broadband, etc. And they bring London out like number. Singapore they don't have so high. They have Boston surprisingly high. They have London high. The Japanese cities less. I haven't looked at it lately, but it's an interest. But it depends on what the criteria are.
Well, all those criteria include, these are the top cities according to most people lately, so curious, what are
But I
you,
don't think they're the top cities at all. London is hugely innovative, particularly at the moment. Paris is in trouble, but the great cities, Singapore is famous, the branding there is that it is famous for its ruthless government and economic prosperity. This is not, and if you know about it and you've been there, Boogie Street, which has the best transvestites on earth, you can't tell the difference. Johnny probably can tell you about it. By day, it's just a boring street. At night, they turn it into great French restaurants, and the girls parade down the middle. Astounding. But no, I don't think these are the first cities at all. Helsinki is a remarkable. I spent quite a lot of time in Helsinki, and I would not put it high because it's cold and boring. And unless you want to drink an inordinate amount of Korstagorba, which is their native drink, stay away from Helsinki. But the Finns are wonderful people. I love them.
so
What I see,
here's another ranking, and it has London #1, Zurich, Taipei, New York, Barcelona, Singapore, Paris, Oslo, Amsterdam, Surat.
but if you look at them as a world cities, they have lots of culture also. But also you look at these cities as with I would say that they have administrators. I mean, if you go to Singapore, you can't chew gum, you can't spit on the street.
Correct.
There's no crime. But what brings them all together are the things we said earlier. They're great cities of culture. And people go to the different cities to look at culture. And with the development now of anthropology, which I would major in if I were a young person, with all of the satellites and they're digging up cities, we know that we've had great cities in the past. We have great cities hundreds of thousands of years ago, 200,000 years ago, and those kind of things. So I think what I see here is a combination of old cities and new cities, but culture. Why do you go to San Francisco? You wanna see the hills and ride the cable cars. You want to go up and down the crooked street in San Francisco. Why do you go to New York? I go to New York, put on my Texas hat, stand in the middle of the street, and just look up at all the tall buildings and let the car.
Okay.
So I think it has to do with a lot of. Why do I go to New? I mean, I just love history. I love history. I love going to the French quarters, right? I love going to those. I love going to New York City and look at the old wall of Wall Street that was done in the old days to protect the city. And and the economic stuff is very, very important. But I do think even in Austin, which is known as the music capital of the world, it's the culture and the beauty of the city and that culture that bring people together. And I think people, of course, love to have things to do. But people say, "Where do you spend your vacation?" Well, I went to London. I went to New York.
Mm-hmm.
They don't go to places where there's no culture.
Yep.
Sure. Well, you've got it right. We may argue about which cities have it, but no, you're largely right. And culture is a very important part in many other ways too. It's not all about money and business and technology. And you're right. Culture is, people go to London for the theatre, New York for the theatre. They go to Italy for the opera. Painting is probably they go to France. Has a tremendous, there are so many great French painters. Or they go if they want the older schools. You go to Amsterdam and to any number of Italian cities. But contemporary art, it's London, Paris, and New York. San Francisco has always tried and never quite made it. There was a famous newspaper man who worked in San Francisco, and his editor said, go out and write about San Francisco as the Athens of the West. Well, he was a very bright guy, and he went out and he found out there was nothing coming out of San Francisco, a lot going into it. And New York had more books written, more plays produced, more music, more of everything conceived. And San Francisco, this was before the computer revolution, of course, and Silicon Valley. And Silicon Valley isn't a great tourist place. I used to go out out there before it became famous, when there was one hotel. Anyway, this is very exciting. I'm so glad to hear the role you give to culture, because I think it does make life livable and cities attractive.
I do
Absolutely.
agree. And I think going forward, what's interesting about American culture is really European culture. We would say, well, the cultures are in the culture, the arts are in trouble. Well, Willie Nelson had 10 million the other night. Well, we're not talking about Willie Nelson. The culture in America is New York culture. It's the opera. It is European culture. We do have some interesting American culture, like jazz in New Orleans. That's strictly American culture. But for the most part, when we say the arts, right, in America, we're talking about European art for the most part, although there are other kind of artists. So whatever the city brands themselves as, I mean, just think of what happened to in Roswell, New Mexico. How much money have they made from the city by saying, "Hey, we're the city where the aliens landed, where the spaceship crashed," and everybody would go there to see that. So it also brings in people who are cultural, looking for something else to do, and we call that customers. Yes.
Andres, I've got a question for you.
Yeah.
In Latin America, at one time, the hub where all the writers went was Rio de Janeiro. Is that now moved to Miami?
Oh, yeah.
I know, Miami is now the cultural center of Latin America, which
Totally.
is extraordinary.
And economic center.
It's really extraordinary because I think is I have to learn the name of the great writer who, when he was growing up in Colombia, Marquez, when he was growing my
Garcia Marquez, yeah.
He was said everything happened, and the center of everything in his world, of a world of ideas, was in Rio de Janeiro.
Right.
But today he would probably not be trying to get into Rio, he'd be trying to get to Miami, where the opportunities are. And the one thing about the arts, and it's actually also true of restaurants, they encourage each other, they breed each other. If you get a street full of restaurants, all of them will be good. You get one stuck in the middle of nowhere, it'll be god awful.
Right.
They make, and I think it's true in education, a lot of other things. They're competitive, but they also infuse each other.
Correct. Yeah, and this is where competition is healthy, right?
It's more than competition, it's a society is created.
Right. Absolutely.
And there was a little street in Virginia which had 3 or 4 restaurants, then it had 8 in Arlington, Virginia. And the food got better as the restaurants in the old established ones, one because they were competing, but 2 because they were competing not necessarily for customers, but for their art, cooking, presentation,
Absolutely. Well, it's been great to connect today and talk about the Diesel 360 and some of the things that came out of it and what's going on. But time is up, and always a pleasure, gentlemen. Johnny, take us away. You're muted, Johnny. You're muted.
I'm going down to the Greyhound station. I'm gonna buy a ticket to ride. I'm gonna find that lady, 2 or 3 kids, and sit down by her side. Right till the sun comes up and down, around about 2 or 3 times. Smoke a cigarette on the back seat. Try out songs on the people I meet. Get along with it all. But where the people say y'all sing a song with a friend. Change the shape of it and get back in the game. Start playing again.
All right.
Hey,
Roger, well done. Well
Bye,
done.
guys.
I like them. Okay, take
Thank
care.
you. Thank
Alrighty.
you. Thank you. We'll be in touch soon.
Take care, Lewellyn. Okay, all right.
You too, my friend. Bye.